Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and it's finally preview season. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're all doing fantastic. Got a lot of games that we've tested, and I'm excited to share some thoughts with you. Let's get it kickstarted with Guardians of the Galaxy. This comes from developer Eidos Montreal, who's best known for their work on the Deus Ex franchise, a fantastic RPG series at that. I personally adore Human Revolution. I love its level of replayability, its depth in its universe. I think all of it is superb. And I know some folks are displeased with how the third entry concluded. So I understand why some folks are coming in going, how is Guardians? So I spent a little bit over an hour and change with the game, and I'm here to share some thoughts with you. One thing I want to make clear, though, because we are in a post-cyberpunk world, is I have done these streamed sessions where I preview a game through Parsec, and normally they will capture the gameplay locally on the computer streaming to me, so then I can have it for my content. But this was a case where they said, we are just giving you B-roll and assets from the studio, which isn't always a cause for concern because prior to Cyberpunk, this happened a decent amount. But I feel in a post-Cyberpunk world, you should be aware of this. So just know we are provided the things that we are showing in this. And I'm going to have to use my words and my colorful vocab to describe everything to you that I experienced. So with that, let's talk about this game, which is releasing October 26th on PlayStation, Xbox, PC. So, where I picked up with this game was about 4 hours into the story. We were heading to Novacorp to pay a fine, but we were also looking for a woman named Karel. While we were there, it seemed like things were not going as smooth as you would hope. The station was abandoned, and we were exploring a lot of empty hallways, wondering what happened. No one had greeted us on our way in, and this is where I noticed a lot of the dead space is filled in by banter. So the party is constantly talking in Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think is fitting. And I thought that the way they were written worked well enough where it wasn't on the level of like Forspoken. I hate to trash a game mid-preview, but in Forspoken, when we heard the dialogue, they were like, whoa, man, I just did that with my hands. Where in Guardians of the Galaxy, it's more so like they're ribbing each other. You got Drax, who's still clueless as ever. You got Groot saying, I am Groot constantly, of course. You know, why wouldn't he? Raccoon's just a douchebag. And like Gamora's this sort of like distant, cold person, but also like kind of nice. And I feel like overall they've written them pretty well on a personality level. We'll see what depth's offered there. But I thought the way they bounced off each other worked pretty well for the preview period. We don't know if it'll get annoying, grating, it'll go downhill. We don't know any of that right now. But I liked what I heard compared to other superhero games like Avengers. Speaking of which, on a visual level, this game isn't Avengers level in the terms of like, dear God, what happened to the heroes? This is more along the lines of, okay, this is probably the best we can get of these more realistic renditions before we start to chart into movie territory, where there are some slight differences, and I think the worst of them all is Drax, Drax just doesn't look well. There's something wrong deep down, I think, and it's really unfortunate. But beyond that, I think everyone looks pretty good here, and I have no complaints. But it's also just a sign that art style is so important, because you look at something like Ultimate Alliance 3, and no one at all is complaining about how anyone in that game looks, because I think the cel-shaded art style grants you something that realistic game models just suffer from in Marvel titles. As you're exploring these areas, there's a plethora of written logs. And like I said, the banter is also filling out some of the lore for the game. There's a journal you can go into. You can revise some of these written logs you're picking up. These shouldn't surprise you because, once again, this is coming from Eidos Montreal. And in Deus Ex, you could climb into apartments and offices and hack terminals. But what I want to emphasize here is it's far more linear, and there is not nearly as much of that lore pounding as there is in those types of games. Now, I don't know what the rest of the game will be like if it opens up anymore, but I felt like there could have been opportunity for more here, but we'll see how they explore that. The way they could explore is through Guardian actions, which is really important for both in and out of combat. So when you are out of combat, I had a situation where I was with Raccoon, and we found a little tunnel area, so I shot it, and all of a sudden this area was open, and I had to command him to go in there. And when he did so, it enabled me to do a puzzle. And this puzzle was laid out similar to something like Watch Dogs, where you'd open your phone and you'd have to move all the little nodes constantly until they all matched up, and then the area or the thing you were trying to do would be unlocked. So it worked exactly like that puzzle. Once again, can't show you visually, but just think of that. And then the door had unlocked. But it wasn't like I could send Gamora up here to get through this door. I could send Rocket Raccoon this way. Like, there wasn't like a number of ways to approach things. It was very linear. And then after that, you kept moving along. And so the Guardian actions in combat are where I think things are much more interesting. So in this game, you only play as Star-Lord. So you're going to be floating around, shooting your guns. You're going to be using your own set of abilities. But more than anything, you're going to have to lean on your team. And I think the chemistry built into this single-player system, it's like the most co-op single-player game ever. I actually think it's kind of impressive in a way what they've done here. So the enemies are a little spongy, frustratingly so, and I hope that they tune them down. But systemically, I kind of liked what was there. So what I was doing is elemental shots, where I would shoot ice out of my guns, freeze an enemy, and then I could call in Gamora for a sword slash, and she would cut them down and they'd instantly die. Otherwise, I'd be pumping them away with my guns, and while that would do damage and I would eventually kill them, it was much quicker to call in a teammate. Same thing with Rocket Raccoon, where there's a lot of enemies here. I don't have any AoE attacks ready right now. I've used my abilities. Call him in, he'll throw a cluster grenade, and boom, goodbye enemies. Groot can tie down a bunch of enemies. Drax can break the shield of certain enemies, where if they're really tough or spongy, you can knock them down and then lock them down with, of course, Groot. And so there's a lot of teamwork in this system, despite it being a single-player game. And I gotta say, I thought this was a pretty solid foundation. We'll see how repetitive it gets, because I did feel the sponginess starting to immediately grind me down. I think sponginess is just a big pet peeve of mine. I'm not saying there are people who love spongy enemies, but for me, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. And so it was something I was experiencing. But then again, there are a lot of mechanics that had yet to be unlocked, such as perks. So when you fire up the game, you'll be in your ship and you can go to a workstation where Rocket Raccoon will walk you through all of the different perks that you can get. And you unlock these perks through components and advanced components. And these are one of the things that fill in those like dead hallways in the NovaCore station that we were in, where you would see like little sparkling things on the ground that you'd pick up. And once you found a workstation, you could spend them on these perks. So it would be things like your shield would start recharging quicker, or you could fly around the air a little bit longer during combat. Little incremental upgrades like that, being able to track people with your visor while in combat. There were things like this that overall made your experience a little bit better, but weren't major game changers. The big game changers came in the form of abilities. So as you finish combat, you'll get XP and you'll earn ability points that are team-wide. So if you get one ability point, it's not for Gamora and Drax and Groot and Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord. Like, it's one ability point, and once you spend that on whoever, it's gone. That's it. So this was something I didn't know, but I think I still made the right call and spent all my points on Star-Lord since you're playing as him. But what was cool is to know that there were other abilities and builds that you could do, but don't expect like the depth of a huge RPG here. Where I really was interested with this game was, given that it's coming from the Deus Ex developer, I was thinking to myself, okay, it seems like they're toying around with choice here. So during one section of dialogue in this chapter I played, I was able to see how my party reacted to a decision I made. And then I went through the game demo a second time, due diligence, to see what happened when I went the other route. So what happened was, in this situation, I was in the NovaCore station, and I found the helmet of a NovaCore soldier, and you had the option to put it on and listen. And when you did, you had a choice to speak to them or to not speak to the soldiers who were on the microphone. And so my first time around, I spoke to them. They were like, "Who is this?" And they came and found me, and combat ensued. There was no avoiding combat as far as I was aware. Then you go back again, and when I put on the helmet, I didn't speak. And this time I avoided that combat section entirely. But I still ended up eventually fighting the NovaCore soldiers. And honestly, it felt a little out of whack there, because what happened was, when I found the NovaCore soldiers, you found them attacking each other. And so the Guardians were like, "Should we get them?" And I'm like, "Are we going to attack them now?" And I'm like, okay, like, we're going to leap right into this right now. I mean, like, do we feel a little hasty because they're fighting each other that we need to fight them? Whereas in the encounter where we had talked to them, it felt a little more natural, like, oh, okay, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong here. And so ultimately, all it felt like was the choice I made was I avoided one encounter. However, the game accounted for it, saying the Guardians did not like that decision. And so what I'm really keen to find out is, if based off the choices you make, will this group start to fall apart? Can it fall apart? Will the game allow that? I think that premise is very, very exciting. And I'd love to see a superhero game really toy with that on a deep level. But I'm not really holding my breath based off the example I had, but granted, it was more of a proof of concept rather than what the full mechanic does. Combat itself, though, I think was the real standout part. It had a lot of personality to it. So beyond the guardian actions and the weakness targeting, you were able to do active reloads like Gears of War, where those bars would show up, and as long as you hit the right trigger at the right time, you would reload perfectly and get right back into the fight. Beyond that, there was the stagger bar, which is really important to note because this is what really fueled that combat loop of getting the guardians involved, stunning these enemies, making sure they're vulnerable. And then there was also music that was playing, and it is going to be a DMCA nightmare. Let's players find something else to play. That's all I'm going to say, because they played like the final countdown, just a ton of really popular songs that were very Guardians, helped fit the vibe, brought the moment up a notch. But if you're going to be Let's Playing this game, good luck. They're going to get you good now. Overall, there was a nice diversity of enemy types. There was one with a shield, there was a sniper type, there was one with grenades, there was a standard grunt soldier. And I thought that combat was enjoyable, but once again, that sticking point, to me at least, is the sponginess. I found it rearing its ugly head a little too often for my taste, and I would have appreciated them toning it down ever so slightly, tweaking those numbers some more, because it didn't make me feel like a superhero at the end of the day when I'm just like boom, 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 and the enemies got half their health, even though they were staggered, even though I called in a guardian ability on them. So this is something that I could see being a smidge frustrating for some. One other thing I want to note is that this game, its facial animations are really not that great. I get it, it's a month out, there's a little bit more tweaking that can be done, but some of them were really kind of awkward and very deadpan looking. And I could see the internet kind of picking them apart. Not the level of Andromeda, by the way, but they definitely look like they're not fully there. So after finishing my preview and walking out, I didn't want to judge it too hastily because it was just an hour and it was kind of, you're getting thrown into the heart of it. And I feel like they wanted to show you something more combat heavy rather than the story and get a really good feel for that so that we could experience that as fresh as possible, which I always appreciate in a preview. But I didn't walk out of it excited either, which I think is hard to do because it's very hard to, especially in a small sample size, walk out and be like, you know, if you look at my previews historically, a lot of them I do enjoy, right? Like I enjoyed Outriders, I enjoyed Borderlands, etc., etc. So for me, that's the kind of internal gut feeling is like, okay, if I didn't really like that a ton, then how am I going to feel after 10 plus hours of the game or whatever? But we'll wait and see on that. Overall, I'm open to being surprised by this game. I don't think it's bad by any means. I don't think it was unimpressive. I thought that it's doing some cool things with combat. I want to see them fully execute these ideas in the game entirely. I can't really call right now how impressive something like the conversation system will be and the choice and consequences will be until I play the game. But beyond that, overall, I just walked out pretty much still in the middle of the road going, okay, we'll see this game when it fully launches. And in your case, if you are not reviewing it, you'll wait and see for the reviews, is what I'm saying. So keep it on your radar, keep an eye on it, because I think some of the combat systems are enjoyable, and I think the story elements can maybe surprise some people if they go the way, at least I'm hoping they do. But we'll see. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into this preview of Guardians of the Galaxy. Keep it locked here for more coming your way. Other than that, be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Big thank you to all the patrons and members who are supporting the content here, opening up opportunities like this for us. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.